Hello, how are things? Fletcher Hamilton here, and this is the channel Fletcher Hamilton. So, I had planned a trio of videos relating to Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's unelected Prime Minister installed by Peter's coalition, and her handling of recent events. She's throwing taxpayers' money at the homeless. She's throwing taxpayers' money at the Maori. She's throwing taxpayers' money at New Zealand's legacy media to bail those has-beens out of financial ruin. And then she's effectively deputizing the Maori to be traffic wardens, to form barricades on roads up and down the country, to direct or turn away traffic as they see fit. It's a fairly typical pattern in New Zealand. A national government gets the ship of state out of the storm and into smooth waters and fills the coffers with monetary surplus, and then a Labour government takes the helm and throws all that capital around like there is no tomorrow, which they claim there won't be, unless you continue to vote them in and follow their every decree. We need immigrants for business investment. We need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to ensure that the sun doesn't go supernova, swallowing every planet in the solar system. We need labour to stop human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. That trio of videos is hopefully coming up soon. For this video, I want to examine what Cindy Ardern has done during the COVID-19 crisis. I hope you interpret the emphasis on the word crisis as ironic, because that's what I intended. Because what she's done insofar is fairly draconian stuff. And then she goes and does something else entirely. And if this was Dumb and Dumber, I'd then say, and totally redeems herself. Well, Cindy Ardern is something straight out of Dumb and Dumber for sure, but this isn't a movie. No redemption forthcoming. She's just sunk to a new low and established what I believe to be a new, dangerous precedent in New Zealand politics. Now, I don't know what you think of the coronavirus or COVID-19. I've talked to all kinds of people, and if you had to adopt a scale on which to gauge their beliefs, it looks something like this. At one end, at the bottom, number one, people claim there is no virus. It's all a pretext to exert authority in some weird global social experiment and nullify people's rights. And then there's number two, there is a viral pandemic, but the disease itself is so benign as to be epidemiologically irrelevant. Right up to number 10, at which point you genuinely believe that if you set foot off your doorstep and inhale the air outside, you'll contract some deadly disease that makes Ebola look like a Sunday morning hangover, and you'll soon be gasping for breath, turning black with cyanosis, and painfully drowning in your own snot until you're dead. Personally, FYI, I fall somewhere between 2 and 3, but closer to 2 for myriad reasons, which I'll summarize now, though I don't want to get too much into the specifics themselves. I want this video mainly to discuss the Ardern government's response to COVID-19. But as for those reasons, I'll quote them. The CDC's findings are that the hospitalization rate for COVID-19 is 0.04%, or 40 people in 1,000 who catch it. and it has an associated mortality rate of 0.01%, which is 11 in 100,000 people. And those 11 are likely to have comorbidities like diabetes or other immunocompromising conditions. We also know that to boost the numbers on paper, deaths from other causes are being attributed to COVID-19 if the patient may have been infected with it, to exaggerate the death toll. The Telegraph reported that children are not vectors in the spread of COVID-19. The Royal College of Pediatricians stated that no case of child to adult transmission has occurred that we know about. We also know Neil Ferguson, who attempted to forecast how the disease COVID-19 would operate and spread on his model, got it completely wrong, just as his models for mad cow disease, bird and swine flu, etc., were also wrong. Nonetheless, the government trusted him anyway. Also, the University of East Anglia determines that lockdowns have little effect on the course of the disease. This is corroborated by T.J. Rogers of Stanford, who discovered that in the US, a comparison of states that locked down early compared to states that did so later bore no correlation between lockdowns and COVID-19 deaths. A one-variable correlation showed 5.5%, which Rogers deemed a statistical irrelevancy. Plus, separate studies from Switzerland and Dr. Thomas Munier show that the epidemic was unlikely to spread before the implementation of lockdown, as the public were already aware of the disease and acting accordingly. It could have been stopped, and it has been stopped with non-state intervention, but with interpersonal hygiene, voluntary personal actions, and the cancellation of major public events. In short, people's own voluntary actions in practicing social distancing, wearing masks, and being more vigilant with personal hygiene was apparently enough to stop COVID-19, or so the evidence suggests. The overwhelming bulk of evidence indicates that this disease is perfectly manageable with ordinary social measures. So, whatever the initial information, or lack thereof, it seems pretty clear that whatever minor danger, relatively minor danger, COVID-19 constitutes, this danger was vastly exaggerated, and the response of the public in lieu of government decree has been more than sufficient to halt the spread of the virus. Seemingly, the New Zealand Labour government, like other governments around the world, are being pretty damned selective in the scientific reports they choose to base their actions upon. I'll totally concede, at the beginning, some overreaction was inevitable and warrantable, as the beginning of the crisis, in the beginning of the crisis, nobody knew exactly what was on the table. But now we have scientific data, we have the pertinent stats, and we have knowledge of how the virus operates. And yet the government doesn't seem inclined to update or modify its responses. Instead, it's doubling down, abusing the initial assumption that COVID-19 might have been a legitimately more dangerous emergency, and using that to expand the police state. Because, since the Christchurch massacre, we know that Cindy Ardern, as anti-capitalist as she might be, is nonetheless perfectly prepared to capitalize on tragedy and never let a good one go to waste, as they say. First was her attempted gun grab. I say attempted because I'm unsure how successful it's been in the last year, or to what degree people have complied. And now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, whilst the country has entered a so-called Level 2 measure of management, in which in-store businesses can operate, schools and tertiary education institutes are running, and you're free to eat out and travel where you like whilst maintaining efforts to social distance. But nonetheless, any gatherings such as weddings, religious ceremonies, parties, or social events of the kind are limited to 10 or less people. It seems to be under this decree, whereby parties of people are limited to 10, that the government have passed a bill bestowing to the New Zealand police the power to enter homes in lieu of a warrant. Ergo, the police now have sweeping powers just to waltz into your home because they see extra cars parked on the road outside, or they hear a party, or music, or voices emanating from inside, or any reason like that. Freedom is cancelled and replaced with control. Apparently, this bill has an effective life of 90 days, and or will be reversed once the country hits level 1. As suggested by another YouTuber, I think these new powers will be used when coronavirus magically reappears in September to force people back inside under the auspices of "we're keeping you safe" when election time rolls around. Cindy Ardern doesn't like elections. Elections are to Cindy Ardern what a mirror is to Freddy Krueger. Similarly, I think the power will be invoked to thwart protests and campaign events for opposition parties. And even if not, it's still tyranny, however it's used. It's tyranny by dint of the fact that it exists in the first place. It's a complete overreach of power. This bill was allegedly rushed through with some scrutiny from the National Party and ACT, who didn't support the bill and condemned the legislation as an overreach of police power that effectively removes accountability from internal police orders and indicates a general lack of trust between the police and the New Zealand public. Likewise, the Human Rights Commission is concerned. But we're getting all the usual excuses from Labour MPs. If you question Cindy Ardern, you're just being cynical. If you question recently passed legislation, as National Deputy Leader Paula Bennett did in Parliament, then Cindy will reject any and all concerns with words to the effect of, "There is no politics in a pandemic." Guys, there are no politics in a pandemic. Andrew Little, Dick, claims that this isn't how laws are made, but the times are extraordinary. All terribly convenient, if you ask me. Oh, normal scrutiny and political process is non-applicable because we're in such a hurry to save your lives, peasants. How about this? If anyone in society believes themselves to be in mortal danger, then they can reserve the option to self-isolate. They can stay in their homes, if that's what they want. If other people want to get out and get on with their lives, go to school, go to work, barter and trade, or play hacky-sack by the road, or hang out with 10, 20, or 47 of their mates, then isn't it their prerogative that they can assess and accept the danger like independent adults and take their own risks? Why not let people make their own decisions? Because clearly this is how we defeat COVID-19. The power to do that lies in the community ourselves, where people can make their own decisions that they deem acceptable within their own daily interactions. How on earth is it within the remit of government to manage people's safety to this ridiculous autocratic extent, how can community, or even personal level decisions, be shanghaied by government without ethical examination? And is it really about personal safety? No. Ardern was placed into power by the formation of a coalition rather than any decision by way of a public vote, and demonstrably the power has rushed to her head. She's used every crisis insofar to covertly implement laws, and now effectively bypasses Parliament and rules by decree. Any investigation, any future investigations into criminal activity are now that much easier without due process. Even activity undertaken by people that the Labour government, people like Andrew Little, Dick, and Comrade Cindy, deemed to be opponents of Labour or their ideology, can now theoretically be shut down when police or enforcers just saunter onto the premises to shut down any function they like the wrong protest gatherings, the wrong marches, the wrong demonstrations, the wrong campaign meetings. And even if all this isn't true, and I'm being paranoid, it's still your right to privacy that is potentially nullified here, as well as your right to due process. And all for your safety. And that little stunt yesterday? Was it yesterday or the day before? Or the day before that? The one with Cindy. Comrade Cindy Ardern being turned away from an overcrowded cafe in that suspicious little spectacle of, look at me, everyone. The rules also apply to me, so don't worry. I'm not a hypocrite. We're all in this together, with peace and love. Even if it wasn't a pre-organized publicity stunt, it still definitely worked out as well as impromptu manipulation of the public perception. Abrupt ending. And with that, the police state has arrived in New Zealand, largely welcomed by the legacy media therein. After it takes a massive dump in your bowl and doesn't flush, and proceeds to clog your basin with hair, it'll then raid your fridge, plonk itself down on your sofa, and stick its muddy shoes up on your clean coffee table to hunker down all nice and comfy. It's not going to want to leave. This, courtesy of Jacinda Ardern and her Labour Party cohorts. You've been listening to Fletcher Hamilton. Oh, and obligatory disclaimer, this video and the sentiments expressed therein are in no way intended to rile up any unwarranted animosity to the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, Andrew Little, or the New Zealand Police. I advocate peaceful resolutions. I do not advocate or condone any threats of physical violence or physical violence itself to the people or entities referenced herein. Thanks so much.